Matthias for mamoworld.com, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you
Yeah, hello, this is Matthias for mamoworld.com, and in this tutorial, no, we are not going to look at how to do this last shot with this robot arm, but instead we are going to focus on one of the shots here in the middle where a lot of action is taking place. And how to create this shot I'm going to explain you in 3 steps. So in the first step we are going to track our shot with Mocha, and if you know already how to track in Mocha, this is probably nothing new for you. I give you a few tips what you need to take care of if you want to export not corner pin but transform data. Anyway, these are just a few minutes, so feel free to skip them if you know this already. In the second part, I'm going to show you a really powerful technique that can be used for any kinds of compositing. So what we are going to do is we are using MochaImport to create a stabilized pre-comp. Such a pre-comp gives you another perspective on your footage, namely a stabilized perspective. This is really useful since you can do any kinds of modifications in this stabilized setting as if you would have a locked off shot. Finally, in the third part, we are going to composite some elements from the Action Essentials collection from Video Copilot. I think there's not so much to learn in this part as in the second one, but I promise it's gonna be a lot of fun. So that's it for the summary, and let's start right now with the first part and tracking in Mocha. Okay, so the first step consists of tracking in Mocha. So we click here to create a new project and select the clips that we want to import. So in this case our backplate, go to next. Here also everything is okay. Here we change the frame rate to 25 frames per second and click on finish. Now we have here our footage imported, and since we actually want to manipulate the wall here, so we are going to track this wall. And this time we are interested actually in transform data. So I roughly select here the wall, right click to finish drawing, and now I disable here shear. So I do not want to track shear or perspective since I want to export later transform data, and transform data only contains information about translation, scale and rotation. So these two won't help me at all if I need transform data, so just deactivate them and click here to track forward. You see, by the way, that the image is heavily motion blurred, but that this is no problem for Mocha, so it nicely tracks this shot. And also if now parts here are leaving the frame, yeah, Mocha has no problems at all in tracking this here. So you get a quite decent track with just a very little amount of work. So let me just fast forward until this track is finished. Okay, so that's it, the track is finished. And as you can see here from the movement of this red mask, or we can also enable here a grid, so you can see that quite nicely follows my wall. So this is a good track, and we just go here to export tracking data and choose this time not corner pin but transform data, go to save and save it to a file. So let's call this transform track, save it, and now let's switch to After Effects for the second part. Okay, so here I already imported our plate footage and some texture into the project, and what I'm going to do first is drag the footage into a new comp. So here is our footage, and let's fit this to the composition. And the first thing we are going to do is to import our track from Mocha. So we load the tracking data we exported in the step before. Okay, Here also everything can be left as it is. And now we choose this option here. We create a stabilized pre-comp for the selected layer. And the idea of this is as follows. So we select our plate that we tracked and we click on apply. And you can see that the plate got replaced here by a pre-comp, and that here is also a null layer that has been created by Mocha. And if you look at the footage, it seems that nothing has changed. So the composition is completely the same as it was before. But the nice thing is we have now this pre-comp here that we can work in. So I double click on it to enter. You can also select it here via the project. So you can see here is now this plate stabilized comp that you can enter. And if you look at this, it is like a stabilized version of the comp that we had before. So this is the footage, and it's moved now in a way that it is perfectly stabilized, or stabilized as good as your track was. So you can see if I do here something like, for example, adding some text, like this test here. Here, of course, it doesn't move at all. Yeah. And now if we go back to our original composition, it is also automatically included here, and it moves accordingly. Yeah, this means that what we are going to do now is we are doing all the modifications here in our pre-comp, and everything will automatically be updated here in the main comp. So this is a very nice feature of MochaImport, that it creates these pre-comps for you, which allow you to work in a completely different perspective. So, and more precisely here in such a stabilized setting. So what do we want to do? Well, the first thing is we want to have this piece here falling off the wall. And for this, I prepared some texture that we can drag in here and put in front of our backplate. I make it invisible and draw a mask for it around the part that should fall off the wall. So just draw here some random mask shape. Doesn't really matter. Maybe like this. And this is, I deactivate here the visibility of the mask. This is now the piece of the wall. And the first thing we can see is that it is from the color not perfectly matching. So let's add here some tint effect and set this to maybe 40% or so. Okay, already much better. And we also want to make this mask here a little rougher. So we add some roughen edges effect to the texture. And for this, we want to first increase the complexity, and then also make the border a little bit larger. Maybe like this. And the edge sharpness should be down a little. Maybe like this. So now it looks like a part broken out of the wall. A thing that is definitely missing here is some blur. So we will get blur if we enable here motion blur, and also enable motion blur for the texture layer. So you don't see any motion blur here at all because, well, in this comp actually the thing is not moving, okay? But the nice thing is if we go then back to the main plate here, you see that here, if we enable motion blur, the blurriness is visible, okay? So here you get motion blur for free if you enable it here in the comp. So this is without motion blur, and this is with motion blur. So this is already looking quite convincing. Maybe it's still a little bit too less blurry. So I mean, this picture here, this texture was taken by a still camera and high resolution and so on. So it's a little bit sharper than this other background. So let's add also some blur. And here I want maybe to blur it more in the left-right direction because everything is shaking so much left-right. So I take a directional blur and blur it a little bit, like maybe 1 or so. Okay, now we need the pieces that are before this wall here, that are the pieces of the wall that are falling down. For this, I'm going to duplicate my plate and call this wall part. And then I'm going to the first frame and go to time freeze frame. And the next thing I'm going to do is with M I reveal here my mask and copy it, Control C, and paste it, Control V here. And if we solo this now, we have a nice piece of the mask, but this is still moving because we copied it from this plate here, and this plate actually has transform data that makes it moving like this. You can see here anchor point, scale, and rotation are animated. This was done by the tracker to mask script. So we get rid of this data here. So go here to transform, and for anchor point, scale, and rotation, we click on the stopwatch. So now it is perfectly static. Next thing, what we obviously want to do is to, let's unsolo this again, is to let this wall part move downwards. So we go to hit P for position and Shift R for rotation to reveal both of them, and set for both of them keyframe at the first position. And then we go to maybe 15 frames and move the piece downwards so it falls down, and we can also rotate it a bit like this. So we have now a nice wall piece here falling down. We can also make it a little bit more realistic with some additional effects. So I want to have a drop shadow with more softness, definitely. Maybe like this. And we also add the roughen edges effect we had before. So maybe we can also just copy this from the texture. And here you see that all the, first of all, the roughen edges should go above the drop shadow. But even now, the contour of this part is not so nicely visible. So here we should make the border actually a little bit smaller. So for this roughen edges effect, the border of 30 here is a little bit too big. So let's go to maybe something like this. Okay, so now the piece is falling down the wall. And maybe we also want it not to be just one piece, but break into two pieces. So what we therefore do now is to, or not duplicate it yet, we first are going to make the masks here visible and draw a second mask that just shows how to, or determines how to break this piece into two pieces like this. Now we duplicate the layer and with M reveal the masks here in the first and in the second wall part. And in the first wall part, we set the second mask here to subtract. So then only this part is contained and this is subtracted. And in the second, we do not set the second one to subtract, but to intersect. This means only this part of the wall part is remaining. So now we have two parts, and now we can also animate them separately. So hit R for rotation. So the second one rotates a little bit different. So maybe like this. Okay, so now you have two pieces falling off the wall. We also enable here motion blur and preview here in the main comp what we have got so far. Okay, so the next thing that is missing is that we bring in some footage elements from the Action Essentials collection from videocopilot.net. So if you don't have this, you might also find similar stuff, maybe somewhere on the net for free. Detonation Films is a good place to start. Also, the DB Rebels Guide, if you have this book, has some couch scripts that are quite useful. So, however, so at this point you can't really do much. You somehow need good footage to continue. I've chosen this Action Essentials collection, and I've already selected here the files that I need from this. So what we want to have is, first of all, some powder hits here that somehow makes this impact here of this part falling down the wall a little bit stronger. So basically we can just drag them in here and maybe move it at the correct position. This could, for example, have an impact here. And we can also scale it down a bit, but not too much. And a second powder hit maybe taking place here. So these are already ready to use elements. If you have other ones, you might need to use a specific transfer mode, for example, to compose it. But the Video Copilot collection has the nice property that all these items already have alpha channel. You can just drag them in and they readily work like this. So you can see this makes a little bit like dust from the parts that break from the wall. Very nice. And now we want some bullet holes in the wall, and also these are from the Video Copilot collection. So I drag, or let's just drag all of them at once. I've chosen here 4 holes. These are just images, and I click on S to scale them all down to the size we want them to have. So maybe like this. And now I distribute them over time. So the first bullet hit is maybe at frame 1, let's say. Okay, and then the next one is a little bit later, maybe, oops, I've still selected all of them. So the next one is maybe here, and then the next one maybe around here, and then the next one here. And now I distribute them over the space. So here is the first impact, and it could be, for example, at this position. Now here's the second, and the second one I want to have, for example, here. The third one I want to have maybe here. So it would look nice. They are here close to the part that is breaking. So maybe like this. And the fourth one can, oops, the fourth one is this one then, can finally be placed, for example, here. And always when you composite, make sure that you have the right order of your layers. So you can imagine that these holes here are behind the dust. So take your powder hits and move them above your holes here. Yeah, already much better. Another thing is, these holes are, again, still footage, still images, so quite high resolution and good quality, better quality than the footage I have here. So I want to blur them a little bit. So I go to the effects and select here the fast blur effect. Drag it onto the first element here and set the blurriness to 40. So this is high-res image, so you need to blur quite a lot. And I copy this effect and paste it, Control V, also on each of the other holes here. Okay. So now I have my 4 bullet holes occurring here one after the other, bam, 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 like this. Okay, and now I want to also make visible the impact of the bullet hitting the wall before the hole occurs. So, and for this I have these couch hit elements here, and I drag the first of them in, like here, These can actually be on top of the others here. So the first couch it looks like this, and I drag it at the position where the first hole occurs, so around here, and scale it down. You can hold Shift while you scale to scale in all dimensions simultaneously. And then I drag in the second couch it, and first of all I move it in time until the point where the second bullet hole here occurs. Maybe one earlier, or yeah, maybe like this. Move it here, scale it down. Here the second bullet hole occurs, so third hole occurs, so third couch it. Like this. And also scale down a little bit. Bam, bam, bam. And here finally the fourth one occurs, so I drag the fourth couch it in, also move it here in time correctly, and then also scale it appropriately. Like this. Okay, so you can see this works quite fast. Just dragging the element where you want them to have, and usually not, or at least in this case also not much color correction or so is necessary. The last thing that we want to do here is to add in general some dust. So I have also a dust wave element that comes in the very front. Just drag it in here, and if you look at the dust wave, I solo it first so you can see it. You can see here the dust occurs. It gets bigger and bigger, and we want to start at a place where already quite some dust is here, so maybe at this point. So I drag it over. Now also already from the beginning we have quite some dust here, and I unsolo it again, and you notice that actually I composite the dust here in the pre-comp, so I really want the dust to also move with all the rest, and this makes it really much more realistic, much better than just dragging this here on the main comp. Yeah, if the dust moves with my footage, all of this looks much more realistic. Maybe it's a little bit too heavy. Maybe we go down here with the transparency a little bit, like this. Okay, and that's it. So let's just take a final look at the final result. Maybe these impacts are still a little bit too intense, too light. So maybe we can do something about this. So one easy way, what you could do is to just lower the transparency of those. Another thing is to play with the color, but I guess that here it would be sufficient to just make them a little bit transparent. And finally, another thing that is of course missing is the motion blur. So we can play around with the motion blur, whether we also want to have motion blur in these powder hits and so on or not. One problem with this is that they might then disappear and not be visible anymore, but we definitely want to have motion blur here for the metal holes. Yeah, and with the couch hits you can experiment. So I think for this time I would leave it without motion blur for them. Or maybe we can even try the motion blur for the couch hits. Okay, I think you see that at this stage you can play around a lot also with where to place all these different elements and how they fit together in the best possible way. So, however, I'm now quite satisfied with this result. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. My name is Matthias for mamoworld.com and see you in the next tutorial.